Hi guys, kamusta kayo dyan? Sorry, medyo hindi natuloy itong plano natin, ang interview natin with Bossing Kristan. Dahil nga sa sobrang traffic, sabi ko drop by na lang ako dito sa tita natin na malapit sa working place natin kanina. Nag-drop by tayo sa isang event with the Department of Foreign Affairs. Of course, shout out naman dyan dun sa mga kaibigan natin sa DFA. Napakaganda yung mga discussions kanina about disarmament, about ways to make sure drones, yung mga lethal autonomous weapon systems, mga yan ay hindi magiging nakakatakot, na hindi mangyayari yung Terminator situation. So, we had some very interesting discussions a while ago on the technology, on the legal aspects of it, prohibition, regulation. Also, pinag-usapan namin ng mga others ways by which we can have international cooperation. Especially by non-superpowers on this issue, no? Para hindi magiging scary yung mga innovations ng artificial intelligence at saka weapon systems. Hindi tayo magkakaroon ng Terminator future, no? Now, so I was looking very forward to itong discussion natin with Kristan because, we were hoping to talk about a number of things. Of course, he's Chinoy, so I was looking forward to talking to him about how the Chinoy community deals with itong issue ng West Philippine Sea and all the racism and xenophobia in the country, and of course, they need to distinguish between the Chinoy brothers sisters natin and Pinoy, diba? Not only by heart but by citizenship, everything, no? And the policies of the Communist Party of China. The two are very different. I was looking forward also to discuss with him how to deal with fanatics, how to deal with haters, how to deal with yung mga tao na ay makinig sa katotohanan, how to deal with disinformation. So hopefully, God willing, we'll have this tomorrow. So we had to reschedule it. So stay tuned tomorrow, hopefully 7 p.m. No, ituloy natin discussion natin with paring Kristan. And I look forward to having more discussions with him in the future on a whole range of issues. Medyo gawin natin na semi-R&R for that matter. No? So good evening din sa inyo. Now, so don't worry, we're cooking up a lot of things here and there to make sure that we get you the best of ideas, we get you the best of discussions on a whole range of issues. In fact, yung isa sa mga gusto natin pag-usapan with Kristan is itong bitcoins, no, digital currencies. Of course, I've always been skeptical of bitcoins because if I were really into bitcoins, I would have bought bitcoins noon pa. But at the same time, I'm not a hater of new technologies, including digital currencies. So there's a lot to discuss there. So it would be nice also to talk to Kristan about Bitcoin issues. So again, deepest apologies, third world, I don't know, hindi nag-work yung internet. Ang dami kong na-close, everything, inulit-ulit namin yung mga connection natin, ayaw talaga gumana. So despite my best efforts, it means that perhaps best na ma-reschedule natin yan, but I look forward to more discussions with him. Now having said that, kanina, over Twitter, nakita natin a number of important developments. One is, of course, the Republic of the Philippines has finally joined more than 150 nations calling for immediate ceasefire sa Gaza. And of course, this is because of the horrible situation that is happening on the ground right now. We have thousands of children killed. Civilian casualties are really, really high. The worst we have seen in the conflict, in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in quite some time. Thousands of children, more than 100 children per day, based on some counts we saw the other month. So this is way worse even than what's happening in other parts of the world, including the war in Ukraine. So in light of that, more than 150 nations have called for immediate ceasefire. And despite all the talk about eliminating the militant group in Gaza, there's little evidence to suggest that after all of that horrible casualties and bombings and airstrikes and all of that, there's no evidence that the militant group responsible for heinous attacks on October 7 is anywhere close to elimination. So I think medyo namulat din ang Pilipinas at na-realize natin na it's time for us to call for immediate ceasefire in Gaza. So that's a good thing that the Philippines is joining more than 150 nations around the world. Only over 20 countries abstained and barely 10 countries voted against it. I'm not just going to go through the list. You can know the usual suspects on that. Now, having said that, of course, we hope for a long-term solution to this problem because all lives matter. Whether on this side of the border, on that side of the border, it's not about taking sides. This is about making sure we have a just peace and we making sure that we don't have a situation whereby more than 100 children are killed on a daily basis, no matter who they are, no matter their color, creed, their nationality, and religion, right? That's something that we have to keep in mind. Now, having said that, kanina meron din tayo nakitang updates na itong Speaker of the House, Martin Romualdez, has mentioned that one of their legislative priorities for next year could be constitutional change. So, balik na naman itong isyung Chacha. So, kung pansin niyo sa first two State of the Nation addresses ni Marcos Jr., hindi niya pinag-usapan yung Chacha, yung constitutional change almost at all. Kaya, first State of the Nation address pa lang niya, galit na galit si Kibuloy, right? Galit na galit yung mga kaibigan natin sa SMNI, mga world-class journalists na kaibigan natin sa mga bayani sa SMNI. Galit na galit sila because clearly, hindi na prioritize ni Bongbong Marcos yung issue ng Chacha, charter change. Because as he admitted himself during election period last year, I think February 2022, he said something like, because very controversial yan. There's no clamor for it, and there's a lot of course debate about whether federalism is really what we need. There's a lot of debate about whether charter change is really the way forward. Now, having said that, the thing is, it's hard to look at the issue of charter change today, or without looking at the concerns of some camp na 2028 could be a way for the Dutertes to come back to power, right? Parati natin nakikita, especially mga ka-DDS natin na followers dyan, every time na pinag-usapan natin yung potential revocation of franchise of SMNI, every time na pinag-usapan natin itong itong end ng unity team and potential marginalization of Dutertes in 2025 elections, parati nakikita ko sa mga comment sections sinasabi nila, bawi kami 2028, Sara for the president, yung mga ganun. Of course, yung mga pangasar din natin, Tulfo says hi, di ba? Because, the mga ka-DDS natin are thinking that 2028 is gonna be the same as 2016 or 2019. But things could be very, very different come 2028. In fact, things could be so different that there may not be a 2028 elections after all. Because if next year pa lang, mapupush na sila for charter change, meaning they discuss the foundations of a total overhaul of the Philippine constitutional order, that means that probably the 2025 elections will not be affected, but after 2025 elections, whoever dominates the Philippine Congress will most likely be part of the process that will change yung ating saligang batas. Now, as things stand, habang humihina yung kampo ni Tatay Digong, habang nag-hemorrhage itong PTB laban, more and more people going to the Martin Romualdez and Lakas CMD camp, of course, it's increasingly probable na 2025 midterm elections will be completely dominated by pro-Marcos people or pro-administration people, including some people from the opposition or reformist people who are feeling far more comfortable with a kind of a undeclared alliance or coalition with the essentially counter-unity team, as the actual unity team has fallen apart, and because siguro mas marami yung never Duterte kaysa never Marcos, right? As far as the opposition is concerned, as far as the 16, 17 million, whatever million people who didn't vote for BBM and the unity team last year. Not to mention, of course, there are also many people who voted for the unity team, but they were not necessarily for Duterte. They were there perhaps for Marcos, and there are also many people who were there for Sara, but not necessarily for Marcos. So, mahabang usapan yan. So as the unity team falls apart, there are big discussions about what's going to come next. Now, the rationale that the Speaker of the House raised a while ago, among others, was economic provisions of the Constitution. Kailangan daw natin, sabi ng iba, at least yung advocates, kasama dyan, si Robin Hood Padilla, yung mga magaling na experts na ganyan, na kailangan natin yan para maging asensado tayo. Alright? Now, there are many problems with that argument. First of all, there's very little high-quality scholarship that backs up that kind of monocausal simplistic analysis. Because you have countries as diverse as Vietnam, one-party system, China, one-party system, and at the same time, countries like presidential parliamentary like Taiwan, or countries like fully parliamentary like Japan, all of them extremely developed and successful over the past half a century. So we have many different political systems creating relatively similar economic outcomes. So that tells you that the causality chain is not really the form of government. The causality chain is perhaps strategies employed by these countries, yung trade and industrial policy. The other argument against the economic provisions premise is that, di sana, ang ginawa muna natin is titingnan natin yung epekto ng mga bagong amendments na pinapasa. First of all, you don't need to change the Constitution. Pwede mo naman i-amend yung Constitution, right? Hindi mo na kailangan ng complete charter change. You can just amend certain provisions of the Constitution to get the economic outcomes you need. For instance, reducing restrictions on foreign investments. The other argument, of course, against that is that actually, may mga pinasa na batas under the former Congress to make the Philippines more competitive and open to foreign direct investments. But the problem is, dahil may mga makulit dyan na gusto nila charter change entirely, hindi na fully na-implement pa yan. So, yung implementing rules and regulation for new economic reforms, economic provisions reports, ay hindi pa rin nabuo ng husto on time. So, we have to give that time. So, in short, before going all the way to charter change, tignan muna natin yung option ng amendment. Pwede natin amyenda yung ating saligang batas, or i-implement muna natin yung mga hindi pa na fully implement na mga economic reforms, especially on foreign investments, especially on investments in certain sectors that were off limits to foreigners. So tingnan muna natin yan, at saka yung mga reduction of restrictions or barriers to foreign investments, no, among others. So in short, medyo problematic argument na ay kailangan natin ng total charter change para lang maging economically competitive tayo, because you can just amend the Constitution, and at the same time we have not even implemented some of the new economic reforms that were already passed under the previous administration, Congress, but have yet to be fully implemented. So yun yung mga sinasabi ng mga critics ng ganitong argumento. Now obviously, some would say, okay, ano lang yan, reason lang yan, pa-effect lang yan, because the true intention maybe here is actually political, not economic, right? Because, we had long discussions about industrial policy. Please check yung mga discussions natin on industrial policy, why the Philippines needs a proactive industrial policy, because that's really, for me, the way to get the high-quality investments in, But speaking of this, charter change, obviously, it's hard to say na this is really about economics. This is probably more about politics. And speaking of politics, I think yung iba nag-iisip ngayon, panahon ni Digong, actually nagsimula yan panahon pa lang ni Ramos, di ba? Panahon pa lang ni Ramos, there was already push for constitutional change or chacha, or constitutional convention. Matagal na itong usapan nito. Panahon pa lang ni Ramos, there was a push for that. But remember, back then our democracy was still very young, so Corazon Aquino was very much against it. Even Pinoy was dangling the option of constitutional change. But then again, that was seen as a way of undermining our democracy, meaning allowing for one man or one leader or one president to overstay power. And then there was, of course, the precedence of Arroyo, who stayed almost a decade in power under semi-controversial constitutional, under the shadow of constitutional questionability, if I can put it that way, put it mildly, not to mention the Hello Garcia situation. So, when this issue came up during Digong, mas natakot ang tao, because ang point nila is, nako, pag si Digong nag-push for constitutional change, this is gonna be a Marcos Sr. 2.0 situation. This is gonna be another martial law. And yung mga pinagsasabi ni Digong for 6 years na gusto ko ng ganito, gusto ko ng ganyan, military junta, martial law, patayin yung mga ganito, patayin yung mga drogista, patayin yung mga ganyan, ayoko sa West, ayoko sa democracy, yung minumura niya yung mga senators, minumura niya yung mga leaders, intimidate niya yung Supreme Court. So, lalong naging suspicious ng tao sa issue ng constitutional change. And in fact, many studies, including a very authoritative study by the UP School of Economics, showed that actually if the Philippines push to federalism, this will be even more disastrous. I mean, logic lang. Pag naging federal tayo, more power to political dynasties, more power to trapos, more power to warlords dun sa mga iba't ibang probinsya around the country. So, having said all of those things, clearly, there was a lot of reasons to be skeptical about the logic of constitutional change when Digong was in power. Now, Marcos Jr. was smart enough to realize that a Marcos in power would raise even more, suspicions about another martial law if he pushed for constitutional change. But now that the unity team is falling apart, now that Marcos Jr. is gaining more and more support from the so-called Never Duterte camp, And now that Marcos Jr. feels comfortable because he's getting international legitimacy, he's being embraced by the West, whoever becomes the American president, Republican, Democrat, looks like they're invested in a strong relationship with the Philippines. Now suddenly you see some of the allies of the president once again bring back itong discussion on constitutional change or charter change. Not to mention, there's also the aspect of President Marcos Jr. mobilizing once again yung kanyang partido na Federalista. Remember, he ran under the Federalista party, right? So it makes, ahead of the 2025 elections, it makes sense for BBM people to talk about this in order to rally their base. Even perhaps win over some of the pro-Duterte camp who are also for charter change and are realizing na humina na yung isang kampo, doon na tayo sa kabila. And then I won't be surprised, there are also some people in the opposition who are saying, well, if charter change means that wala ng 2028, therefore wala ng 2028 opportunity for Sara and Duterte to come back, then maybe we're open to that idea. Again, as always I say, be careful what you wish for. Because there are many debates about this. First of all, is there a clamor? I'm not sure any surveys show that. The Pulse Asia surveys, among others we have, showed that very few Filipinos are interested in constitutional change. Second thing is it really the answer to our problems? Again, I explained to you, I can give you 10 countries, completely different political systems and forms of government, but all of them managed to become progressive and manufacturing powerhouses, which tells you the chain of causality is somewhere else. Pangatlo, even if let's say constitutional change, what kind? Concon or Chacha? Each of them have different modalities. Some of them are going to rely more on people, us ordinary people, to have a say. Some of them are going to be completely dominated by trapos. The trapos will determine, CONAS for instance, the trapos will completely determine how the constitutional change will happen. And then some are saying, well, let's find the middle ground, which is maybe we can talk about amendments of the Constitution that target some of the problems, let's say economic investments provisions. But even that argument is kind of questionable because, as Mig Zubiri and some of the senators said, hindi pa natin na-implement yung mga bagong pinasang batas that are supposed to bring down barriers to foreign investment. So how can you say status quo is not working, you're not even implementing fully pa? Or hindi natin binigyan ng panahon yung mga bagong batas na pinasalang ng isang taon about to make the Philippines more economically competitive. So this is where I think this Chacha debate is going to come back with vengeance, precisely because the environment, the political environment has changed dramatically, and there are new realignments. There are radically new realignments, and I won't be surprised that some people are going to say two things. First of all, pag 2028 elections, you're still gonna bet on Sara Duterte to win it because, I can only think of Tulfo having a very good chance against her as of now. My sense is if Tulfo runs, if Sara runs, that opens the space also for Riza Ontiveros or someone from the progressive opposition to run. But then again, if there's a betting, it's still gonna be Sara the front runner for 2028, no matter what, right? At least as things stand, not no matter what, as things stands, pala, sorry. So some people would say, you know what? Let go for constitutional change, shift to a parliamentary system, not federalist, but parliamentary system, and BBM will still be the president, and then the prime minister will be someone he can trust. Let's say Martin Romualdez, and then from there could be an engineered process to make sure that Duterte will never come back again, and that someone close to Marcos, someone acceptable to centrists and even some liberals, etc., will be the prime minister and will stay the course, right? So that's going to be the other possibility people are looking at. The second reason some people may suddenly be more open to this idea than before is to say, mabilis ang growth natin, but it's not inclusive. At napag-iwanan na tayo, the Philippines has to do something dramatic. And who knows, maybe with some tweaking of the constitution and all of that, we might make the Philippines far more competitive. Again, hindi ako hater. I'm open to ideas. I'm open to discussions on this issue. I think a parliamentary form of government is not a solution to all our problems. Only simpletons and propagandists would say that, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe parliament system might work for the Philippines. But then again, I always say, be careful what you wish for, because some people, I think, they're so excited to make sure hindi na makabalik ang mga Dutertes that they're willing to tolerate an engineered process of political transition that locks in essentially the current realignment. Essentially locks in the emerging new grand coalition at the expense of Duterte's, right? So let's look at this debate. So I'm not going to say more about this because I'm waiting for more details. There was just a speech by Speaker of the House Martin Romualdez, but I think that tells you that hindi natapos yung issue ng charter change. If anything, if the pro-Marcos camp wins big in 2025, and if they're determined to make sure na never nababalik mga Dutertes, then they have not only all the incentives, but they may have all the political capital to actually change the constitution come 2026, 2027. And then by 2028, we'll shift to a parliamentary system with perhaps Marcos Jr. still as a president or something like that, but more symbolic. And then we'll have a more parliamentary system which will rely not on popular vote per se, but a combination of popularity and at the same time party alignments and party power. Alright? On that note, thank you very much. As you can see, tumatawag na si Picasso sa akin. Kailangan natin na kumain. Thank you very much. Again, apologies, hindi natuloy yung interview with Kristan. But we're hoping to rearrange that again soon. Hopefully next year. Next. Tomorrow. Gutom na. Traffic. Hopefully tomorrow, ma-rearrange natin yan. At please, feel free to send forward your questions. Ano mga gusto niyo pag-usapan aside from Bitcoin? What is it to be Chinoy? What is it to fight against disinformation? Those things that I have in mind in our upcoming discussion with Kristan, among other people. On that note, thank you very much, guys. God bless, and talk to you soon.